From the School of Life Foundation, this is another episode of What You Given, a broadcast based on the invitation, find what brings you joy and match it to the needs of the world. This becomes your gift. Everyone has something inside of themselves to give, and I want to know, what are you giving? In my interviews, we meet people from all walks of life. I am Jack Rolfe, and on the show today, I have Erik Sorenson. Hello, Erik.
Hey, how you doing, Jack?
Doing great. Thank you so much for taking some time to be with me and with our listeners today. And I'm excited. I've been excited ever since I knew we set up this interview. Erik Sorenson is a man with a lot of energy and a lot of passion and a lot of great things about him. And so I can't wait to jump into this. So I'm going to do it. Does that sound good?
Let's dive right in.
All right. You know, I've known Erik here for many years, and I'm just going to start out. If somebody was to ask me to share three words that come to my mind when I hear the name Erik Sorenson, what would those three words be? And here they are: God, family, and entrepreneur. Am I pretty close with that, Erik?
I think you're very close. No one's ever actually said that. Three words that describe me. I like that. God, family, and entrepreneurship. Yes, that is true.
Awesome. I love that. And so let's use that as a little platform jumping off here. Let's start with the first one, God. How does God play a role in Erik Sorenson's life?
Well, I appreciate you asking that. And a lot of people, when they think of God, they think of spirituality or religion. And to me, it's a little bit different in the sense, when I think of God, I think about him being intricately involved in every aspect of your life, including business. And in fact, a lot of the business decisions that I made over the years have been impressions, inspiration, revelation, whatever you might call it, that I believe comes from God. I believe all of us have that in it. Some people call it the voice. Some people call it intuition, but I believe that's God that knows more than we know, obviously, and can see the gaps that we can't see. They can see the blind spots. And I can't tell you how many times in my life, both in my personal life, in my family, and even in my business, where something didn't make sense in my head, but it 100% made sense in my heart. And that is one of the hardest things to do, especially in businesses, when you're making a decision about something that will require you to essentially walk 1, 2, 3 steps into the darkness. And you do that not because it makes sense in your head, but it makes sense in your heart. And that is really scary. But every time I've done that, every time I've had that spiritual impression from God, it's worked out every single time, way beyond what I ever thought was possible. And so for me, I have a very good relationship with God, and he's somebody that I try to incorporate in everything that I do. In fact, one of my biggest things that I tell myself every day is to listen to the voice, because I know that when I do that, I'm not relying on my mind, which our minds are not built to necessarily thrive. I mean, our brains are built to survive. That's what they're built. That's why we have so many negative thoughts. That's why we play small. I mean, our mind is meant to sort of keep us small, and then and protect us, kind of like, back when we were cavemen, we didn't want to get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. But when you listen to your head, sometimes you try to use logic and reason, when the truth is nearly every major success I've ever had in my life, in family and business, the steps I had to take were not logical. But sometimes you have to jump off the cliff and find your wings on the way down.
Erik, I absolutely love that. And it's like, bam, right out of the gate, I'm already receiving inspiration just listening to you. And, you described it a lot of different ways on this What You Given podcast. We phrase it as your soul speaks to you. And are you listening? And not only are you listening, and like you talked about, then do you have the courage to actually act upon these inspirational moments that you have? And I know you've had several throughout your life that kind of brought you to where you're at now. And so I appreciate you sharing that. So let's launch that into the second word of Erik Sorenson, family. Tell us about your family and what family means to you.
There was a quote, and I don't remember who said that it was no success can compensate for failure in the home. And at times in my life, I'll admit I had spent more time on the business versus at home, and then sometimes vice versa as well. It is really tough to find that delicate intention. I don't say balance. I don't believe in balance. I think balance is actually a lie, because you physically can't be in two places at one point, at one place. You can't think two thoughts at one time. It's not so much balance as in, I think balance is more intention, meaning when I'm home, I could be completely at home and with my wife, yet be at work in my mind. Right. And
Right.
My wife said to me one time, she's like, it's not your time that I want, it's your intention, your mind, your presence. And now I think about that. So to me, it's being intentional about your presence versus work and versus home, which has been a big blessing to me. But family is one of the most challenging things you will ever do. Marriage is one of the most challenging things you will ever do. You know, if you think about it, it is so hard to raise a family, and especially in my situation where we have a lot of kids, it is really challenging. Thank goodness I have a superhero wife who helps out significantly with that and also supports me in all my dreams to build businesses and grow empires and all that fun stuff that I love to do. But family really, when it comes down to it, is everything. And I've never been the perfect father, of course, and or husband. But I'm telling you, I'm learning lessons that are helping me significantly right now. But when I think of family, I think of the highest highs and the lowest lows. But honestly, it's good that way, because the best things in life you have to fight for. The best things in life require struggle. If they don't require struggle, we do not respect them. And family is the most sacred thing on earth. And because of that, it's also one of the most challenging things on earth to raise kids and be a good husband and have a great relationship with your wife, and the craziness that's going are all around us in the entire world right now. So for me, it's a lifelong pursuit, of course, to do that. But I believe that the biggest joys in life are found inside of your family. I don't know of anything else that I've actually experienced the highest highs in my life than with family.
You know, I want to play off of that for just a minute here. You talk about family being the thing that can bring the biggest joy to your life, but it's also one of the hardest, most difficult things. And you know what? Isn't that true, Erik, with everything in our life? That the things, even outside of family, that bring us the most joy are oftentimes the most difficult to get there. Do you find that as well?
Oh yeah, 100%. Everything that I've done in my life, though, that it has brought me success or brought me joy or brought me happiness was very difficult and frankly, very painful to go through. I used to be the guy, and you probably know this about me, Jack, because you knew me when everything was roses and everything was great and everything was happy and exciting, because my mom had blessed me with this very positive attitude. And trust me, I would rather have that than a negative attitude. But the challenge with that is I would just roll over the problems and ignore them and not really take care of them, because life is good and life is great and life is meant to be happy. And, you know, I have incredible parents that taught me to look at the bright side of things. The glass is always half full. It's never half empty, until I went through massive pain and challenges and struggles in my life, from relationships to business failures to, oh boy, you name it. Really having so much pain and challenge and suffering in my life, to the point where at even one point in my life, I even questioned God exists. When you get to that point where you are so beat down and you are feeling so defeated in life, it's tough. And when you are in that pit, it's really hard to get out and you start questioning everything. But I found that even the massive pain that I've experienced in my life and the challenges, I had a choice. And when I was in that pit, and there's been several times this has happened in my life, one a few years ago, that was the worst. And when I was in that pain, I had a choice. Either I can let it define me or I can let it destroy me. And I've seen so many people that have chosen to destroy, and they walk away from God, and they walk away from family, and they walk away from the best things in life that will bless them the most. Then I've also seen people that it let them define them. And I heard it once said that success can be defined as how high you bounce after you hit rock bottom. Well, I thought I had hit rock bottom several times until I had this experience. And I'll just tell you really quickly, I'll never forget it. I was going through severe challenges in my life, and at the time, severe challenges in my marriage, which ended up in a divorce. And I was really questioning God and really questioning everything about my life. Cause like, why is there so much pain? Why can't I solve this? Why can't I fix this problem? And it felt like my whole world was crashing down. And at the time I owned about a little 2-acre property, and I had horses, and I'm sitting in my home, and I was alone. I don't know where my family was. I don't remember. This was 8 years ago. And I'm sitting there, and there's this massive storm. At the time, I lived in St. George, Utah, where you live. And you know how in the summertime, we get those thunderstorms. And when that hits, the wind just hits and it just crashes. And it was one of these major thunderstorms. And if you've ever had horses freak out when there's a lot of wind, and they freak out when there's lightning. And so the horses were going crazy, and I could hear them. And I'm inside in despair and defeat and this pain and suffering, and to a point where I just don't even want to go another step. I just was like, I'm done. I had whatever. So I went outside, and I went to check on the horses, and I'm walking to the horses, and the wind is so incredibly insane. I went and I got them settled. I got them in their little place in their corrals, and I'm walking back to the house into the wind. And I'm like, this must be a really cruel trick that God is playing on me, because I'm feeling this massive pain. I don't know how to get out of this challenge in this situation. I don't know what direction to go. I'm feeling completely lost. And now this, I don't know what the wind direction was. It's probably 40 plus miles an hour, maybe 50 miles an hour. So much so that if you walk into wind, you can kind of lean into it and you won't fall. Right. Like it was that. And it was hitting me so hard. And I'm just like, I have no energy left. I'm completely spent. I'm at rock bottom, and I'm walking through this, and I fall to the ground. It's still really painful to think about. And I fall to the ground, and I asked a question that I'd never asked in my life. Do you really exist? Are you real? And I'm sitting there on the ground, and I get up, and I start walking to the home, and I went inside. And it wasn't 3 days later. 3 days later, after asking that question, that everything changed for me. That God spoke to me in my life in a way that I had never had him speak before, ever. I heard his voice, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I did it, and I moved forward. And that was the lowest point of my life, but it changed everything for me. It solidified my belief in God. I saw almost that I had that thought of almost he didn't exist, to the thought of, oh my goodness, he not only exists, but he loves us and he cares about us and all of these amazing things. At every step of the way, he has been there, including when I'm sitting there laying in the dirt in the middle of a massive storm that was happening outside of my body and inside of my body at the same time. And it wasn't easy. I've always found that chaos always follows creation. So when I tried to create this life, this direction, everything that I needed to go to, it was a pivotal point in my life. Hitting rock bottom was the best thing that ever happened to me. Hitting rock bottom put everything into perspective. And I did. Again, I had that choice. Will I wake up to who I really am and rise, or will I let it destroy me and go the way of the world, forget God, forget everything? And it has led me to an incredible life, to an incredible family, incredible business, incredible people that I'm surrounded with, more happiness, more joy than I ever knew possible after that experience. But I had to experience that darkness before I was ever able to experience the light. And here's the crazy thing. I realized that darkness is actually divine. I mean, when I first heard that concept, I'm like, no, it's not. Darkness is evil. That's like, it's not divine. That's from the adversary. And I realized that no, God created both the light and the dark. And the darkness is divine because it is in the pit of darkness where you will learn your biggest lessons in life. Well, you will gain massive perspective that you probably couldn't gain otherwise. It's in the darkness that we have the opportunity to finally strip away all the conditioning, all the things that we tell ourselves, all the preconceived notions that we have about who we should be or what we should be. And we're just standing there figuratively naked, right, in this pit, stripped away from all ego, all everything else. And in that suffering, in that pain, the greatest lesson I have ever learned in my life entered my mind and in my heart in that period. And it helped me rise to who I am. And it is really tough to completely enjoy the light unless if you have been in the pit of darkness. And because of that, and I've been in it several times, you know, life is not like this straight line. It is like a roller coaster, up and down and up and down, and you get twisted around and you get turned around and you get hit in the face several times. And you get punched and you get back up and you go again. And when you do that, you realize, oh my gosh, like there is this world that it will open up to you after you have that experience that you didn't even know existed. And ever since then, I've been on a mission to help other people wake up to who they are and rise to their potential.
I absolutely love that, Erik. Thank you for sharing. And I know that rock bottom moment for you was a tender moment, a tender thing to talk about. But I'm grateful that you did, because I know that those listening today can feel that and can learn from that. I want to share a couple of things. First of all, for those today, if you're taking mental notes while you're listening, or if you're actually writing down, taking physical notes while you're listening, know that, and know it for me, I guess, Erik Sorenson is a genuine human being. And what he is sharing with us today are true experiences in his life. And he's not making things up. He's not trying to do this or that, but he really is genuine in what he's saying. And, you know, in the School of Life Foundation, just to reframe a little bit what you've said, we teach those that we work with that we have challenges in life every day. Some are small, some are quite large. And but we have a choice, and you mentioned choice. Those challenges can either be a problem or they can be an opportunity. And the choice is ours. The choice is yours. And sometimes it's harder to find that opportunity, but if you look deep enough, you can find an opportunity out of every single challenge in your life. And part of that comes through having these inspirational moments that we talk about. And I appreciate you sharing. I'm just going to add to it. I truly believe these are divine moments. They're promptings for us personally. And again, we need to not only listen to them, but we need to act upon them in moving forward. And, you know, when our trainers in the School of Life work with students, one of the classes, they'll stand in front of the students and they'll hold up a $20 bill and they'll say, "What is this worth?" And, you know, the students, "Well, it's worth $20. And then they fold it, and then they crumple it, and then they throw it on the ground. They step on it, they kick it, and they pick it up and say, "What's it worth?" "Well, it's still a $20 bill. It's still worth $20. And what we're trying to teach there is we come into life fresh and crisp and with value. But as we move through life, we get folded, we get crumpled, we get thrown on the ground, we get stepped on, we get kicked. But as a human being, you never lose your value. And part of that value is we've all been blessed with different gifts and different talents and different skills. And the key is discovering what those are, each one of us. And we do that through these inspirational moments. And as you do that, you start to develop things that you're passionate about. You start to develop your mission, your dream of who you can become, what you can accomplish, who you can help. And as you develop that further, that becomes your gift in life that we talk about. And then the key is delivering that gift. And we're gonna jump into that here in just a minute with you, Erik. But I want to round out our trifecta here. We had God, family, entrepreneur, and so we've heard a little bit, but you've owned and sold several successful businesses, and they've all brought you to an amazing journey in business that you're on right now. Why don't you just share a little bit about that with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I believe that business is a calling. I believe that you are called to serve a people. And when you feel that calling as an entrepreneur, you have a choice. You have a choice to rise to that calling or ignore it and do something else. And I can't tell you how many people that I have talked to that are like, oh, I just feel like I should go that direction. I should start a business, or I should do this. And that is that calling. One of the things that's great about entrepreneurship, if you think about it, entrepreneurship has brought more people out of poverty than any single thing in the world. Wow. Think about it. Every company that has brought an innovation that digs wells in Africa, that's entrepreneurship. Food banks, and like all of this is usually generally done by donations. Every single nonprofit that exists lives because of donations, because of entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship, as some people think, is, people just trying to get rich. And yes, there's a whole segment of that. But I found that one of the best ways to impact positively a person's life is to help them rise to the level of impact that they want to have in others' lives, and also help them rise to the level of income that they want to have. I kind of was, I don't know when this was put into my mind, but I was kind of raised, and this may have not been in my parents. This might have just been my own false belief that sometimes money is bad, or money can be evil. And then I realized when somebody asked me the question, and one of my coaches a couple of years ago, incredible guy, he runs an incredible business. He changes the lives of hundreds of thousands of men. And he asked me one day, and he said, Erik, can you help more people if you have millions of dollars in the bank versus $1,000 in the bank? Can you make a bigger difference in the world? And I'm like, well, obviously, if I've got millions of dollars in the bank, I can certainly help people alleviate suffering and create programs and have resources to be able to help people, as many people as I possibly can. That doesn't mean you need to have money to make an impact. That's not what I'm saying. But I also know that there are things that God cannot call you to because you are living in scarcity. Scarcity is not divine. Scarcity is actually a bad thing. Abundance is what is God's plan. God wants us to be abundant, not just financially, but spiritually. He wants us to be abundant in our lives, to live life fullest. He wants us to have joy, and you cannot have full joy if you're in scarcity. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you're in debt and you don't know how to get out of it, those are all negative things that really help you playing small. And when I say business is a calling, here's one of the challenges. Most people today, or I don't know if most people, but a lot of people live life sedated. I know I've been there. I'm not saying that I've never been that way, because I have. There has been so many years of my life, and I look back and I regret it, that I'm like, oh my goodness, I lived in scarcity and I lived in sedation. And it doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol. It could be like sedating through Netflix or watching TV all day long and just really being average and just going to the 9 to 5 and going through the motions and not being truly happy, not rising to the potential that you have. And there was a time when I was in this cycle in my life, and I call it the hamster wheel of mediocrity, where you're just running on the hamster wheel and everything's the same, and you're living in scarcity. And the crazy thing about that is sometimes this happens to a lot of us when life is good. I believe that good is the enemy to great. In other words, when life is good, you're in the most trouble. I always tell businesses, if your business is good, you're in the most trouble right now. Why? Because good keeps us from great. When things are good, when the paycheck's coming in and you're sort of, you go home, you watch Netflix and you're maybe sedating and you're not really waking up to who you really are. The problem is there's no incentive, because there's no pain in your life to push you to the greatness that you have. And for me, it took that wake-up call that we talked about earlier on the podcast, for me to wake up and rise to who I really was, because things before that were just okay, we're just good. And then I started experiencing massive pain and massive challenges in my life. And it woke me up to who I am. You have a calling. Every single one of you, you have a calling. It may not be to be an entrepreneur. It may to be lift somebody else. It may to be an incredible mom. It may to be to raise children. Whatever it might be, you have a divine calling, every single one of you. And if you are in that hamster wheel of mediocrity, you are keeping yourself from this massive opportunity that you've been given. And you only have one life. And when you rise to great, you can now start giving more light to people, because when you're in that state of being asleep, and a lot of you know what I'm talking about. I think a lot of men are asleep today. Well, then guess what? The problem is it's really, you cannot give light that you don't have. You cannot fill up another one's gas tank when your gas tank is empty, or when you're living in scarcity. And what woke me up was not only that pain, but I read a quote that changed my life. And it said, and I don't know who the author was, I've never been able to find out, but it said, the scariest day of your life is the day you die, when the person you are meets the person you could have become. And that freaks me out. And I thought, there's no way I'm ever going to live my life not becoming the person I was meant to become. And it made me rise. So when I talk about entrepreneurship, my entire goal with entrepreneurship is not to make money. The money always comes. My goal with entrepreneurship is to wake up men and women to who they really are, really see their potential, extract that potential, and help them rise to who they can become, whether it be build an incredible business, whether it be build a nonprofit, whether it be just building their life to where it needs to be. And for me, I believe that there's transactional businesses. I'm not involved in transactional business. Yes, there's transaction. People pay me for this or for that, right? However, I don't believe business should be transactional. I believe business should be transformational. I believe businesses should transform the lives of your customers. And every product and service and program that I am involved in right now is a transformational business, because my goal is to change lives, to wake up people. So that's why I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship, because I have just the blessing of being part of changing lives. And when I get letters, and I get the emails and I get the letters, and like, Erik, something you said on stage at this conference, like, changed my life. Like, God brings people into my life, and I needed to hear that. You know, I'm involved in a lot of like masterminds and groups. This is one of my my clients. We have this group that's a high level mastermind to help people grow their business. It's basically a year-long program where we help them accomplish their goals. But the biggest thing that I do is not necessarily help them have an extraordinary business, but have them help them have an extraordinary life that will change people. And when I get the feedback and the letters, that's the paycheck. Like, Erik, you said something that changed my life. That's what I love. That's the paycheck. So for me, business is not transactional. So I see it a lot differently than most people do. I definitely see it as a calling, but you can see, Jack, that's why I'm super passionate about continuing to grow these businesses, and because they change lives.
I do see that, and I feel it. You know, your passion and your energy is oozing through the microphone. It's oozing through the screen today. And it makes me think, because I'm thinking somebody out there is listening saying, yeah, I can just hear all the negative thoughts coming into their mind right now, right? And so in the School of Life Foundation, the curriculum workbook we use, which has the straight A's of life, is called Learn to School Your Toughest Opponent. And the toughest opponent we ever face in life is ourselves, right, Erik?
Let me repeat what you just said.
Okay.
School your toughest opponent. The toughest opponent you will ever have is yourself. I actually went through the School of Life Foundation program. Oh, I want to say it was 10 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And when I heard it back then versus the perspective I have now, everything has changed. Everyone that's listening, I want you to really pay attention to that. And you might be putting up walls thinking, oh, well, that's not that big of a deal. Here's the truth. It is. In fact, we teach business owners the same principle, that the biggest chokehold of any business is the business owner. Always. 100% true every single time. That is the biggest choke. In other words, themselves. They're also their biggest opportunity is themselves. And one of the things that you need to understand, there's one thing that drives all human behavior. All human behavior is based on belief. In other words, you act the way that you are, you do the things you do because of the beliefs that you have, because of the identity that you created for yourself. And because of that identity, that drives all of your decisions, whether they be good or whether they be bad. One of the challenges, by the time we're 7 years old, a lot of our beliefs are already ingrained inside of ourselves. And so sometimes we have to spend our entire lives facing that. Like, why do you do the same things that you do? Because there's a belief, subconscious or conscious, that that's you, that you are that way. And good luck trying to be somebody outside of the identity you created yourself without first changing your beliefs. And I don't know if you know this, Jack, but the average person has anywhere from 65,000 to 85,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot.
Yes.
82% of which, by the way, are negative, and 93% of which are repeated, these thoughts, from days, weeks, and months prior. So we only have about 7% of new creative thoughts every day. And most of the time we don't act on them. And changing that matrix will change everything. But with those 82% of thoughts that are negative, here's what's the crazy thing is. We tell ourselves so many negative thoughts every day that ultimately over time we believe them. And by the time we're 35 years old, that's sort of cemented in us. And to break free from that will change everything in your life. There was a study done of 300 individuals, and they studied their negative thoughts, basically their negative beliefs, right? Their limiting beliefs that were keeping them playing small, keeping them from who they could become. And this was one of the most fascinating studies I've ever read before. And what happened in the study is they took these negative beliefs and they had them write them all down, and they got really deep on what they were and what they were telling themselves. And then they fact checked them. They went and asked, they found the belief. Is it true, factually true or not? Now, before I tell you the answer, the outcome of this survey, I want you to know that one of the problems with beliefs is the minute you believe it, it immediately becomes true. Not fact, true, meaning true for you. The minute I believe that I suck at public speaking, and I actually believe that, it becomes true for me. I start sucking at that. And so we tell ourselves these things, and all of a sudden we become the very thing that we're scared of because we start believing it. Well, back to the survey, they found that 100% of the negative beliefs of these 300 people were factually false. They're not even true at all. They're true to the person, but they were factually false. So anytime that you say something to you that, by the way, you'd never say to your worst enemy, right? They're factually false. And when you start realizing that what you're telling yourself is not true, it is not factual, everything can change for you. Your entire life can change. And when your beliefs change, guess what happens? Your behavior change, because your thoughts, your beliefs lead to your actions. Your actions over time lead to your habits. Your habits over time essentially lead to your character, and your character ultimately defines your destiny. So if you want to change your destiny, it starts with your thoughts and your beliefs.
That is powerful, Erik. And I feel impressed to pause right now. And for those listening, for those watching this episode, as Erik's been speaking today, I have no doubt your soul has been speaking to you of something you need to change, something you need to do, something you need to read, or somebody you need to talk to, whatever it is that you have felt while listening to the show today. Do it. Have the courage to do it. When this episode is over, don't waste any more time. Start right now, and you will notice a change, even if it's a small shift. And it's that small shift that will lead to the next shift. And if you choose not to do it today, that's your choice. But in essence, I'm going to be bold and say that you've wasted your time in listening to the show. And don't do that, because remember, as we talked about, you have value. The world needs your value. We need you to reach your full potential in life. Picture a world where everyone is reaching their full potential and sharing it. I can't even imagine all of the goodness that would be happening in this world if that was happening. And you know what? We got to do it one person at a time. So let that person be you today. And then you go and share it and inspire someone else to make that change. And then it grows and it grows and it grows. And it's such a good thing. And so I truly encourage you and hope that you do it. And
Just to reinforce that, if you don't mind, Jack,
please, Erik. Yeah.
if you are going through severe challenges and severe trials, first off, I'm sorry. Life sucks sometimes. I've been there. I'm sorry you're going through it. If you are, don't mean to get emotional, Jack. Gosh, you should have told me I was going to cry in your podcast. I wouldn't have come on. But I am truly sorry. But know this: if you're going through trials and challenges that are rocking you to the core, you must be an incredible person. You must be an amazing person. And when you strip away all of that conditioning that you put on yourself, the limiting beliefs and negative beliefs, and how am I going to get through this? And I can't get through this. And I don't know who I am. And I don't know if I can make it through this. And I don't have what it takes. When you strip away all of that conditioning, your true nature comes out, which your true nature is faith, is love, is power, is kindness, is if you really knew what you could become, if you really knew like who you really are, and the massive potential that you have that you can actually achieve in this life, oh my gosh, if you knew how unstoppable you were and how bright your future is, if you just simply rise to who you are, wow. So I encourage you to find yourself, to get through it, even if you have to crawl your way out like I do. And I'm telling you right now, it will become one of the most incredible journeys you have ever experienced in your life.
Erik, I just want to add my thoughts there too, that I too am sensitive and feel for the fact that everyone's going through challenges. We all do. I've gone through mine as well and still do. And so we do respect that, but you can get out of it. And please feel today, as you're listening, that a big part of getting out of it is love. And I'm going to share my own belief here. I know everybody has their own beliefs, and I respect every one of those. I believe that there is a God, and I believe God loves each and every one of us. I believe he created us. Because he created us, that's how I know we have divine potential that Erik's just described. Please feel that love today, because that's where you get started. Just feel it engulfing you, surrounding you, lifting you, giving you power to move forward. And, each one of these episodes we go through kind of takes a life of itself. And it's interesting, the life of this episode, where we've been going. And I appreciate that, Erik. And I want to ask you, Erik, I think we've heard most of this through our conversation, but the tagline of what you've given is find what brings you joy and match it to the needs of the world. So when I say that to Erik Sorenson, what comes through your mind, Erik?
That's an easy one. Immediately, where I find joy is in seeing people become what they never thought they could, accomplish something that they never thought they could accomplish, which reinforces a belief of how incredible of a person they really are and how much they can contribute to the world. I heard it once said that your life will change the day when you focus on what you can give rather than what you can get. And when I see other people just become a massive success, and I don't mean financially necessarily, but how success is how you define it, right? And change lives. When I see lives change, especially when I see a life change through something that I've been able to provide through coaching or education or a lot of the initiatives that I have in business, that is where I find joy, when I can see people that didn't believe that they could accomplish something or become something, and to see them become that person and reach their potential. Wow, that is just there's so much joy in that for me. it's what keeps me going every single day.
It's beautifully articulated. And I have no doubt, Erik, that there are people listening today that their lives are going to change. And you know what, when our lives change, whether for the positive or negative, other lives change around us. So let's make it the positive change, because then we see positive change in other individuals as well. And so, you know, Erik, I could talk all day with you, and I could just go on and on, but we need to be bringing things to a close. So to that end, we've had a lot of insight, a lot of nuggets from Erik Sorenson today. Your final parting comments here. What is your golden nugget? What, if there was just one thing out of everything we've talked about, or maybe we even haven't talked about it yet, what's the one thing you want listeners to take away today from Erik Sorenson?
Well, I usually don't talk about this, and the first thing that comes to mind is know who you are, discover who you really are. I think that's one of the most common questions that we ask ourselves over and over again is, who am I really? And I don't mean like I'm 6 foot tall, I'm 175 pounds. Like, who are you really? Because once you know who you are, then you can really understand the potential that you have. And frankly, you can contribute on a much higher level. When you truly know who you are, there is so much peace in that. And then you realize like how crazy incredible you actually are. And you can actually unleash that potential. You can change the world. You can literally change the world. There have been so many things in life that we thought were impossible. We are surrounded with impossible. This camera wasn't possible 150 years ago. This cell phone wasn't possible. The smartphone was impossible 15 years ago. Airplanes were impossible 120 years ago. Like, there are miracles around us that we never thought possible. And the greatest sometimes impossibility is becoming that version of ourself in the future that we never thought that we could become. The Erik Sorenson, I hate to say it, of 5 years ago wouldn't even recognize me today. I'm doing things that I never thought that I would ever do. It's like I'm a totally different person. And it's like I was, I hate to use the phrase born again, but in a sense, reborn to a better version of myself. And I hope, Jack, that the version of me 5 years from now won't even recognize the version of me today.
Yes.
Because of that transformational experience that I'm trying to create in my life every day, that I'm trying to create for other people as well in their lives and their business, et cetera. So knowing who you are, and then once you know that, like, the whole world opens up to you. And I can promise you, if you're telling yourself something that's negative, that's not who you are. Again, 82% of your thoughts are negative every day. If you're telling yourself something that's negative, or that leads you down in a place that's going to the dark rather than to the light, that's not who you are. And it's hard for us to sometimes say, like, I'm freaking awesome, right? And when we tell people that, or I obviously would never stand up in a podcast and say, Jack, I'm freaking awesome. Like, but we lie to ourselves and tell ourselves the opposite. I can't tell you the millions of times in my life I've said to myself, Erik, you suck at all of this. Like, you're terrible. Like, you're terrible. And frankly, it was true, especially in the beginning when I didn't know a lot. You know, you're terrible. But would you ever, Jack, say you had a let's talk about your grandkids. Would you ever go to your 4 or 5-year-old granddaughter and say, you suck? Like, you can't even, you can't get in front of a camera and give a 2-minute speech. You're terrible. Or would you ever tell to your grandson, who's maybe under a year, like, this kid, he can't walk. He's never going to get it. He's been trying for 6 months to walk. He's terrible. He's never going to get it. He sucks. Would you ever say that to your grandkids?
Never do. In fact, I'm thinking about that. I have 14 wonderful grandchildren.
Do you think there's anything they can't accomplish?
I don't. In fact, I spend my life trying to help them realize they can accomplish whatever they want to.
So I had a life-changing experience with a business coach 10 days ago. And I wrote down all these limiting beliefs of how bad I am at everything and how much the thoughts I tell myself that are all negative, which, as you guys know, are not true, right? It's not who you are. And then she said, I want you to envision your 4-year-old son. His name's Hutch. And I want you to tell him all of that. And I'm like, what? She's like, I want you to tell him that all these things that you tell yourself, say it to him. I'm like, I'm not going to say that to him. She's like, no, imagine he's in front of you and tell him these things you're telling yourself. I'm like, no. And she said, well, why not? And I said, because he's not that. He's the opposite of that. He's this, he's this. And I started like going off on how amazing he was. And then she's like, write those down, right? Like take 10 minutes and write down how amazing your 4-year-old son and how incredible he is at everything that he does. And there was not one negative thing on the page. And then she made me myself tell myself those things over and over and over again, 3 times a day, which I do to this day now. And it's been crazy life-changing. I could not say a negative thing about him because I know he's full of potential, even though his skill set isn't where it needs to be, but his worth is insanely amazing. So do that exercise. If you're telling yourself certain things and you're starting to believe them, flip it on yourself. Say, would I ever say that to my son or my daughter? And make yourself visually say that to your son or your daughter, and it will be like eating poison. It'll be like Tabasco sauce in your mouth. It'll be so hard to do it, but do it and then realize that, guess what? That's what you're doing to yourself. Change that. You've got to change that. And then flip it around and say those things about yourself. And it's amazing. Start telling yourself the truth. Stop lying to yourself about who you are and start telling yourself the truth of who you are. And if you tell yourself the truth of who you are, I can promise you not a negative comment will come out of your mouth. It's not that you're not perfect. You'll never be perfect. My son is not perfect, but he is progressing. He is amazing, and there's nothing he can't accomplish. So I hope that helps.
That helps a lot. And that is a beautiful analogy. And I want to add one thing to this amazing closing nugget you had. One of the quotes I love comes from Joel Arthur Barker. And he stated that vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. But vision with action can change the world. And so Erik's just asked all of us to know who we are, know who you are. That is painting that vision. And he just talked about that too. And so make that vision massive because it is, because you are wonderful. But then it won't translate unless you take action. And so you got to have that vision, then take the action, and then you can change the world. And maybe changing the world is for one person, or maybe changing the world is for 10 million people. I don't know what it is for you, but it doesn't matter. Because even if you change the world for one person, maybe that's the one person that's going to change the world for 10 million. But you don't know, and we don't know, and we don't need to worry about that. But you just need to get out there and do it. And so as I bring this to a close, remember, those listening to the show, that your heart feels for you, your mind reasons for you, but your soul speaks to you. Are you listening? Did you listen today? If so, what did you hear? What did you learn? Will you now have the courage to act upon what you felt? Thank you so much for tuning in. Please follow us on your podcast app or on the YouTube channel by subscribing, so that each new episode is always downloaded, ready for you to listen in. And then, of course, we love to have you share it with others. If you want to send us a message or desire to be on the show, you can send an email to whatchagiven@gmail.com. A special thanks, as always, goes out to our producers, Ben and Kayla Martin. Now it's time to move upward and onward, and ask yourself, what you giving?